Hi, it's Steph, and we're at the Home Depot, and it is now midsummer, and all of their late season perennials and shrubs have arrived, and there's even some markdowns. So let's go ahead and take a look at the late July inventory at the Home Depot. You know what looks beautiful in midsummer? The panicle hydrangeas. And if you have a sunny garden, you can still grow beautiful hydrangeas with these panicles. They can handle more sun. They bloom a little bit later than the macrophylla type hydrangeas or the mop type. And look how pretty they are. These are gorgeous. Now this variety here is my favorite, Little Lime. I have a hedge of these in my garden and I absolutely love it. The Little Lime is more compact than the traditional limelight, which stands to be about 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. This Little Lime comes in at only 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it likes sun and part shade. So I have mine planted in full sun. It handles it beautifully. And as the season goes on and the temperatures get cooler in the evening, they start transitioning to this beautiful shade of pink. This is a lovely hydrangea. I've had mine planted for upwards of 4 years now, and probably closer to 5 years. It is full grown, very manageable, and beautiful. This. And if you love perennial alliums like I love perennial alliums, you'll be excited to know that Proven Winners has a new variety this year. It is this really pretty light purple color, and it has a larger ball-shaped bloom. So the great thing about these clumping or perennial alliums is that they are part of the onion family, which means that critters like deer and rabbit stay away from them. They have this really pretty kind of grassy foliage texture so that even when the plant's not in bloom, it looks like you have a clump of ornamental grass. And there are some popular varieties like the Millennium, the Serendipity, which is also by Proven Winners. And this year they have this bobblehead, which is just getting into bloom now and should open up and have this beautiful light shade of purple in a sphere-shaped bloom, which is really interesting and beautiful in the landscape. So here is the information on the bobblehead by Proven Winners. It is a full sun part sun plant. It is a little bit taller than the Millennium and the Serendipity alliums as well, standing at 30 to 32 inches in height. And this one here needs a 20 to 24 inch spacing. It is hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see at the bottom of the tag, it always gives you some pairing suggestions. And it says to pair it with rose mallow or hibiscus, phlox, Russian sage, coneflower, switchgrass, etc. But this is a really pretty perennial for your mid to late season garden. And these are in a number 3 container for $24.98. And another beautiful perennial for your mid to late season garden is the hardy hibiscus. Now these are a pretty large perennial. They get as large as a shrub, but they are a perennial. I have the Summerific Perfect Storm, which is a beautiful pink and white with a red eye, but this variety here is a new one this year in garden centers, and it is the Summerific Cookies and Cream. It also has the really beautiful dark foliage like my Perfect Storm, but it has this bright white bloom. Now these blooms are really impressive and eye-catching because they're like a dinner plate size bloom. They are huge. These also have a very tropical vibe, these hardy hibiscuses. So they look beautiful planted next to a patio or a pool. And in general, they get to be about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. This variety might be slightly more compact. Let's take a look. So it is a perennial for full sun, part sun. It says 42 to 48 inch spacing. And it gets 30 to 36 inches in height. And I love that at the bottom it will tell you the pairing suggestions as well on these. So very pretty perennial. This one also is late to break dormancy for me in my Zone 6B 7A garden. It usually emerges from the soil in about May. So if you purchase one and you plant it this year and then next spring you start to worry that it's not coming back, just give it some time. And it's also late to bloom. So for me, it blooms in August, but a really beautiful plant for that mid to late season bloom show. And while inventory and price does vary by location, my store is currently having a sale on these number 3 Proven Winners hibiscus at 2 for $40. But the regular price for the number 3 container is $24.98. And some Veronica or Speedwell. Now these are a really pretty spike type perennial, and I love vertical perennials like this because they provide a lot of contrast and interest in the garden. You have your salvias, your Russian sage, your nepeta, and your Veronicas that are a little bit mid to late season. And these are a pink variety. They're in a Home Depot 3-gallon container for $19.98. Always remember that because these are a fairly large container, if you take these home, you can very carefully divide these into multiple plants. At the very least, divide it right down the middle to get 2 plants, and you might even be able to find more division points. The important thing is just to keep them well watered and shaded if possible until they establish a little bit of roots. But very easy to divide these large containers and make your gardening budget stretch. This is a really pretty perennial. I love this pink color. They also come in shades of purple, and Proven Winners even has the white wands, which is a white variety. So it gets to be 14 to 18 inches in height, needs 14 to 17 inch spacing, water when dry. So these like a well-draining soil in full sun in order to perform best. They are hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and they bloom early to late summer. Speaking of providing vertical interest in the garden, here is another beauty for that. It is the ornamental grasses. Now this here is called switchgrass. You can see how it's already putting on its plumes, and this is typically what they consider the blooms on grasses. Now these transition your garden beautifully from summer into fall, because that is just about when they start putting on these plumes, in late summer. But another plant to provide really pretty movement and vertical interest in the garden. It's also a nice texture contrast. So they do like full sun. Most perennial grasses want full sun, otherwise they will start to split and sprawl all over the ground, and you want to keep them nice and upright, and to do that you have to give them full sun. They have a clumping habit. You can leave them up over the winter, which provides again some interest for the snow to catch onto them if you live in an area with snow, or you can cut them down in late fall and then they will emerge beautifully next spring. This variety gets to be 5 to 7 feet in height and needs 36-inch spacing. It is hardy down to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. And these panicums are in a number 3 container for $24.98. And some shrubs, starting with one of my favorite spirea. This is the double play candy corn spirea. And what I love about it is that it really goes through such a wide array of colors. It will start in very late winter, probably end of February, beginning of March, with red foliage. So all of the new growth will be red. Then it will start transitioning to orange before transitioning to a chartreuse shade of green. Very beautiful. And then it blooms for me with these large clusters of pink blooms in June, just like you see in the photo here. It's also a more compact spirea. Now the tag tells you that it gets 1.5 to 2.5 feet tall and wide, but I've had mine in my garden for upwards of 5 years now, and they get closer to 3 to 3.5 feet tall and wide, but still very compact spirea. It says that it likes sun or part shade. My opinion is that it will do better in a part shade location. The 2 that I have planted, one of them is part shade, it does beautifully, and one is in full sun and it tends to get a little crispy. So I would say part shade, these would do wonderful. And they're hardy in zones 4 through 7 down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is in a number 2 container for $29.98. And do you like a butterfly bush but you don't have the space? Well, here is a nice compact option for you. It is the Pugster Buddleia by Proven Winners. This one here might be the amethyst. Let's take a look. They have the blue, which is a deeper color, which actually you can see that there is a couple of the blue. Right there, has more of a violet color to it. And this is definitely the amethyst. I have this one here in my garden, but because I had it planted in a bed that retains a little too much moisture, I did lose it. So here's what you need to know about butterfly bushes. You do want to plant them in a very well-draining soil in a full sun location. These are a little late to break dormancy for me in my zone 6B 7A garden. I would say somewhere around May, but once they break dormancy and start pushing out this foliage and bloom buds, they will bloom non-stop from about late spring until all the way into the fall, where you get your first hard frost. So for me, that was somewhere in mid to late October. See, these are the new bloom buds. So once they start getting spent like this, you can go through and kind of deadhead the plant, take off that to keep it clean, and it'll keep pushing out more growth. I also find that these are pretty fragrant. To me, they almost smell like lilacs. So just a really lovely shrub as long as you plant it in the right location, well draining soil, full sun. So here is the information on this one. It is the Puckster Periwinkle. So I thought it was amethyst. It's actually called periwinkle. Similar shade of purple. It's a dwarf butterfly bush. In general, they get to be much larger than this one, which is only 2 feet tall and wide. It is hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it wants full sun. And this Puckster Buddleia is $29.98 for a number 2 container. And here is yet another spirea. Now this one has a bit more green foliage, but also gets really pretty. It looks like a deep pink bloom cluster. And this is the Double Play Doozy Spirea by Proven Winners. This one gets to be 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, hardy in USDA growing zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Has colorful foliage, a petite shrub, and reblooming. That is excellent because I'm guessing that this bloomed in spring and now it is starting to put on some more bloom clusters. And look at how pretty that shrub looks with all of those hot pink blooms. Pollinators love these shrubs as well. So this is a really pretty one, a number 2 container for $29.98. Again, here's the foliage. You can see that the newer foliage emerges with a little bit of a red coloring as well. And here is the bloom color. And another one of those upright perennials we were talking about earlier, the Russian sage. Now this is a more compact variety by Proven Winners, and it is the denim and lace. So pretty popular variety, stays nice and upright. And in general, Russian sage is anywhere in height from 36 to 48 inches, where this one here only gets to be, let's see, 28 to 32 inches in height. Needs 34 to 38 inch spacing, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9. And these bloom mid to late summer, sometimes even into fall. You can see how beautiful that coloring is. It's like a light purple with a hint of blue. Gorgeous. Now these like a very well draining soil and full sun. Otherwise they will split in the middle and splay themselves out on the ground and not look as attractive. They look really beautiful when they're nice and upright. And to do that, you need to give them soil that drains really well and full sun location, similar to where you would grow something like a sedum. They're very pretty. Now these look like they've already had their first flush of blooms, so they're nice and dried now. So you'd want to cut them down and then they will flush out with some more sporadic reblooming. But this is a gorgeous one. It also has a wonderful fragrance. It smells a little bit like lavender to me. Did you see that? It's a hummingbird at the Home Depot. There's 2 of them actually, and they keep trying to go into the dipladenia and even onto the roses. They're even excited that the roses are 50% off. And another upright perennial that is really interesting and pretty is the Nephophia or the Red Hot Poker. Now, even though the name is Red Hot Poker, they have been breeding some varieties that are a little bit lighter in colors, which I prefer over like a hot color. So this one here has this peachy kind of coral look that is gradient and it fades to a bit of a cream color. Really pretty. This is the Proven Winners Pyromania Hot and Cold Nephophia. And what's great about these is that even once the blooms are faded, you can cut down this bloom stalk, follow it down, cut it off. It still looks like a clump of ornamental grass in the landscape. Great one to add for vertical interest, and you'll still have something to look at after it's done in the way of the foliage. And these are a number 3 container for $24.98. The hummingbirds also love these tubular shaped bloom petals. They get their little beak right in there and have a little snack. If you love roses or have been thinking about trying them, now would be the time to do it. 50% off all roses here at my Home Depot. Now on this table, you can see they have a number of the knockout roses, which are a tough as nails landscape shrub rose. I have several of the double pink knockout planted in my garden and they don't give me any trouble. I just prune them down in about late winter, give them an application of a rose granular fertilizer like the Espoma Rose Tone, and they perform beautifully for me all season long. I get a huge flush in June that pretty much covers the shrub in pink roses. You barely see that there are leaves on it. Then it'll take a little break in July and then it comes back with another flush in August, and I will continue to get blooms throughout the rest of the season. So this is the double pink knockout. Now the knockout roses are hardy in zones 5 through 11. They like full sun in a well-draining soil, and in general these get to be about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, but they come in several colors. The double pink is the one that I have. Then they have the double knockout, which is the traditional red one. These are easy care roses. They have this yellow and white variety. So it starts off a yellow that fades to a creamy white, and this is called the Easy Beezy knockout. And then they also have some coral ones now. So this is a coral colored one, which is also very pretty. And this one is called, let's see, does it have a tag? It doesn't, but I did see another one down the bottom here. So let's go take a look. So you can see they are very pretty roses. So this is the Orange Glow Knockout. Very pretty. This one is hardy in zones 4 through 11, and it wants full sun, 6+ hours of sun per day, orange with yellow and pink. 4.5 high, 3 wide. See, number 2 containers for $24.98, so they would be about $12.50 a piece. Great price. They also have some drift roses, which are more of a ground cover rose. They have a more petite bloom, and they also grow lower to the ground, and they grow wider than they do tall. So this one here has a really pretty peach coloring. It's like an apricot. Let's see if we can find some information on these. Now, a lot of these tags are missing at this point in this season, but you could take a photo of it and try to identify it. In general, these get to be, I would say, about 1.5 to 2 feet in height and about 3 or so feet in width. More great perennials as we transition into the later part of the season. Sedums, we're going to start seeing lots of beautiful and interesting sedums. Now this one has a variegated foliage, as you can see here, and it's starting to load up with its bloom buds. Now I love sedums not only for that late season color in the garden, but also because they're such low maintenance and easy plants. They don't need a ton of water. In fact, they don't want a lot of water. If you give them too much water, they start rotting at the base, breaking off and splitting, and they just look unhealthy. So that'll be a cue to you that they're getting too much water. These want well draining soil, very little water, and they thrive in full sun. I was looking for a variety on this sedum and I can't find a tag. It is $19.98 for a 3-gallon container, and these are also really easy to divide. If you find that one of these stems breaks off while you're planting this sedum, just take the stem, stick it in the soil, keep it moist, and in no time it's going to start putting out roots and you have a whole new plant. Rudbeckia, or Black-Eyed Susan, another great late season perennial. Now this one here is called Little Gold Star. It gets to be 14 to 16 inches in height and the same in width. It is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms midsummer through fall. Also $19.98 for this number 3 container. And you can see the difference in the blooms. They're much smaller than the traditional, say, Goldstrom variety of Rudbeckia. But these are a great plant. The golden color has really grown on me, and they look beautiful paired with a plant like Agastache, especially the Blue Fortune with that blue color and that spike bloom. Contrasting bloom, contrasting color, looks gorgeous. On the side of the Rudbeckia is Coreopsis, also known as tick seed, and these are bloom powerhouses. Look at all of the buds on this plant. It just goes non-stop all season long. This variety has a really pretty kind of a creamy yellow bloom, and it looks like they painted on some red in the center. Very interesting bloom. And this is called the Lil Bang Candy Stripes Coreopsis. It is a perennial for full sun. It gets to be 15 to 18 inches in height, so pretty compact height, great for the front of the border. And it needs 18 to 24 inch spacing. Water when dry, so it likes a well-draining soil, and it is hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early summer through fall. And the Millennium Allium, which is a really popular variety of this clumping annual alliums. Now, alliums, you might think of the bulbs that you plant in the fall to bloom in the spring. They almost look like the Dr. Seuss flowers, right? They have a really tall stem, this gorgeous baseball or tennis ball sized bloom on top. Well, this one has a little bit smaller bloom, but still those beautiful round spherical shaped blooms in shades of purple that emerge in the summer, mid to late summer, sometimes even into the fall. And they're usually purple. Some of them are lighter purple, some are pink, but they are called an ornamental onion. So this is the Millennium variety. It gets to be 12 to 15 inches in height and the same in spacing, and hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Mid to late summer bloomer. Now, I really love that these are deer and rabbit resistant because I deal with both of them in my garden, and because they're part of the onion family, like I said earlier, they leave them alone. And these are also super easy to divide. So if you were to purchase one of these 3-gallon containers for $19.98, again, I would take the opportunity to divide these right off the bat. Because these have been growing in these nursery containers for quite some time, they are more than happy to get out of here, get divided, and get replanted. And they usually respond really well to them. Again, to the dividing, you just want to keep them well watered while they establish. But this, you could probably get about 4 or 5 plants out of it. Yeah, your clump is going to be smaller in the first year, but it doubles in size every year after that. So definitely worth doing it right off the bat. Here is a pollinator magnet. This is the verbena. Now, I grow Verbena bonariensis from seed, and that one is classified as an annual, but it drops a ton of seeds, so every year you will continue to get them popping up in your garden without having to restart them. And they are beautiful. You can see this really gorgeous light purple color atop this wiry stem. They kind of just float above the other perennials and look really pretty in the garden. Now, this variety is the Verbena lollipop. It has more of a branching habit. You can see that it has more side shoots and branching, which means you'll get more blooms, but this one is also more compact. It is shorter than the Verbena bonariensis, which can stand anywhere from 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. This variety, the lollipop, only gets to be about 24 inches tall and wide. When you look at the tag, it tells you that it is drought tolerant and great for rock gardens, and that right there is a clue that these like a very well draining soil that leans dry and full sun. And check it out, friends, the perennials in the Home Depot containers are actually on sale here at my store as well. So check out your store to see if they are on sale there. But $9.98 on sale 2 for $15. That is a great buy for perennials. So this one here, I actually found pop up in my garden this season. I had it years ago. It must have self-seeded, and now I have a plant again. It is the balloon flower, also known as Platycodon grandiflorus. And what's fun about these is look at the bloom before it opens. It looks like a little balloon that you could just pop, right? And it has a really pretty purple bloom. Also coordinates nicely with other perennials in the garden, such as yellow, because purple and yellow are opposite on the color wheel. So it looks really nice planted in here with this coreopsis or tick seed. Let's see how large it gets. It's usually pretty compact. So it says that it's long blooming, great for rock garden. So again, it gives you a hint that it likes well draining soil. It likes full sun, and it only gets to be 6 to 8 inches in height and needs 18-inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early to late summer. This golden yellow tick seed is called the Tick Seed Up Tick Gold Coreopsis Hybrid. And it says it's for mixed gardens, easy to grow, mounded growth habit. It blooms late spring through fall, and it gets to be 12 to 14 inches in height and 14 to 16 inches in width. Hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Some daisies, and this is the snowcap Shasta daisy. They have a little bit shorter and bushier growth habit. Daisies are pretty low maintenance. They just pop up each year by themselves. They're also self-seeders, so once you have a daisy plant, they will drop seeds and you will get more daisy plants each year, and the clump will get larger, which is fun. You can move it around, you can share it with friends. It does like full sun. And this one here blooms early summer through fall. It gets to be 14 to 18 inches in height and needs 18-inch spacing, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, it's great that this is a shorter variety of Shasta daisy, because in general, the traditional Shasta gets to be anywhere from 3 to 4 feet in height, and sometimes they will require some staking, especially if you have them in a windy area or if they're not getting enough sun. If the plant doesn't get enough sun, it starts reaching for sun, which can cause it to kind of lean and flop over. But this is a great option for shorter, maybe even a front of the border type daisy. Another pollinator magnet is the pincushion flower or scabiosa. And I have a variety called butterfly blue that blooms non-stop from early spring all the way through my hard frost in mid to late October. It is wonderful. It just keeps sending up blooms and sending up blooms. Needs very little from me. I sometimes go through and deadhead it, sometimes not, and it just keeps performing beautifully. I will say that sometimes the rabbits do go after mine, but they've left it alone recently, but I do spray rabbit and deer repellent on a regular basis. So this variety is called the pincushion flower flutter rose pink. It is a perennial. It gets large blooms, and this one here would also be on that sale, 2 for $15. Now, even though the pincushion flower is listed as a perennial, I have found it to be, and it is actually listed as a short-lived perennial. So in my garden, they'll usually last 2 to 3 seasons, and then I have to replace them. But I'm happy to do so because they bloom for so long and are such a staple perennial in my garden. So they bloom late spring through fall. They get to be 12 to 14 inches in height and the same in spacing, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And right on the side, they have some sedum. And this is the traditional Stonecrop Autumn Joy sedum. This is a beauty for that late season color. You can see it gets these clusters of large pink blooms later in the season. They are deer resistant. They don't seem to touch them in my garden. Drought tolerant. Again, they like that well draining soil in full sun. And this variety gets to be 16 to 24 inches in height and 15 to 18 inches in width. Sedum is also super hardy, down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early summer through fall. Because sedum have these really waxy and thick leaves and thick stems, they hold on to a lot of water, and that is the reason that they are drought tolerant and don't need a lot of water to keep them happy. They're very drought tolerant once they're established for that same reason, the thick stems and thick leaves. And foxgloves, also known as digitalis. Now, foxgloves are toxic, so if you have children or pets, something you might want to stay away from. But they have these really beautiful tubular-shaped blooms. This one happens to be white with some purple speckling in the throat. The pollinators absolutely love them. The bumblebees like to go in and out of these cups all day long, as well as the hummingbirds. Now, they get pretty tall. They're a quintessential cottage garden flower. And in most cases, foxgloves are considered biennials, which means that when you grow the plant, the first year it works on foliage and root development. In year 2, you will get these bloom stalks with the beautiful blooms, and then the plant cycle will be done. And it does drop seed, so you might get more reseeding going on in your garden, but otherwise, that's the life cycle, 2 years on a foxglove. But the Camelot variety is supposed to be more perennial, meaning that, like perennials, it comes back year after year. Let me know in the comments if you've grown the Camelot foxglove and if it has returned for you in your garden as perennial. It is deer resistant. Foxgloves in general, the deer don't touch. They don't touch them in my garden. They do well in part sun, and I even have some in full sun that do great. They bloom early to late summer. They get to be 36 to 48 inches in height, and they're hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're looking for a more unique variety of Rudbeckia, look at these beauties. These cones pop right up from the center of the plant. It has a double layer of ruffly petals. They're a golden color, and they have a maroon in the center coming off of the cone in the middle, brushed down the petal. Very pretty. These are known as the Black-Eyed Susan Sonora Rudbeckia hirta. It is a perennial, attracts butterflies, long blooming and upright. These are $9.98, and they bloom early summer through fall. 12 to 18 inches in height, 14-inch spacing, hardy to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So they are also a little bit shorter than the traditional Rudbeckia, like the Goldstrom, which gets to be probably closer to 3 feet in height and in width. Very pretty version of the Rudbeckia. And remember, these again are in the Home Depot brand container, so they are 2 for $15. And right beside it, they have some Gara, which I've actually been growing as the centerpiece in a few of my containers this season, and I'm really enjoying it. The bumblebees, the pollinators absolutely love it, and it has this really nice kind of flowy, graceful habit in the center, very airy and very pretty. I think it's a very elegant looking plant. So the Gara, for me, I've tried to grow it in the landscape before and it didn't return, so I'm treating it this year as an annual. I do think that it likes a very well draining soil, think along the lines of like a rock garden, like the sedum and the Russian sage, similar growth conditions. It likes full sun. It says that it's great for containers, and I would agree. It's doing really well in my containers this year. It gets to be 10 to 16 inches in height, and it blooms early summer through fall, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is the Gara Beliza White. One of my favorite spring blooming perennials that have an upright or vertical growth habit, the salvia, pollinator magnet. There are bees on this all of the time. Now, this one is in full bloom here in the garden center in midsummer, and the variety is called, let's see, Salvia Blue Bayou. It is a salvia hybrid. It's long blooming, easy to grow, has a mounded habit. These are $14.98 in their number 2 colored pot containers, and it blooms early spring through fall. Height is 14 to 16, same in spacing, negative 30 degrees hardiness. Now, my guess as to why these are blooming right now is because they just came from a greenhouse somewhere. So if you plant this out in your garden, chances are it's going to bloom in the spring to midsummer next season and not mid to late summer. So sometimes sometimes the plants that you see at the garden centers or nurseries are a little ahead because they are grown by nurseries and then delivered to the store so that they'll be in bloom so you can see what they look like, and they're also more enticing to buy that way, right? Because we get to see the beautiful flowers. But right on the side you can see they also have some astilbe, which is a wonderful shade perennial. Now I just told you that astilbe is a great shade perennial, but yet here it is sitting on the edge of the parking lot in full sun and looking great. The blooms look good, the foliage looks healthy, it doesn't have any scolding or burning on it. So let's check out the specs on this one. It's possible that someone didn't read the tag, just plopped it here. They've been watering it and it's only been here for a day or so, so it still looks okay. But in general, astilbe is a shade plant. This one is listed as shade, as you can see there. And this one's called the Delft Lace. It's an upright perennial. It says it works in containers, Brayton's Shade Gardens, and blooms early to mid-summer. 24 to 36 inches in height and the same in width, and it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, in my experience of growing astilbe, it's a very hungry plant. It likes moisture and it likes food. So make sure that you plant it in an area that it's going to get ample water and also that it's going to get fed in early spring. So late winter, early spring, just as you see the foliage emerging from the soil, you want to go ahead and feed it. So I like to use the Espoma plant tone. It's a granular plant food. You just sprinkle it around the base of the plant, and as it rains, it'll feed your plant. And then they will provide you with these beautiful bloom plumes later in the season. Well, my Home Depot has received the Better Boxwood. Now, if you like boxwood, you might be aware that in recent years there's been a plague of the boxwood blight, which tends to destroy and spread the disease among all your other boxwoods, and then they have to be pulled out because there's really no way to remedy it. However, they are starting to make more disease-resistant boxwood, and the Better Boxwood is one of them. So it says here, disease-resistant foundation plants, useful for low hedges and mass plantings, 3 feet in height, 4 to 5 feet in width. And they're hardy in zones 5 through 9, and they are full sun to part shade. Now, fun fact, boxwood are one of the only evergreens that can handle shady locations. And so these here are $16.98. Boxwood are also deer resistant. So if you want to grow an evergreen that is deer resistant, or you want to do some kind of hedging project, these would be a great option. Now they have 2 varieties. They have the Babylon Beauty and they also have the Heritage, it looks like. So 2 different varieties of boxwood here. So let's check out the Heritage one. It looks like it grows similarly in zones 5 through 9, 3 to 4 high, 2 to 3 wide. A matching set of topiary here for $59.50. It's been marked down half off. Not sure what kind of plant this is. It looks like some kind of juniper, which means it would be drought tolerant because junipers generally are. It's called a Hetzi column patio tree. So I don't like to buy plants that I don't have any idea what I'm dealing with. So I probably wouldn't buy it just because there's no tag that gives me growth information. But it is really interesting, and someone had to grow this to this size in order to be able to prune it. Well, my store also happens to have a 50% off sale on the Endless Summer Hydrangeas, and it looks like everyone got to the sale before we got here because they're pretty picked over. But the great thing about the Endless Summer Hydrangeas is that they are typically macrophylla type hydrangeas, or the mop head types, and they have been bred to bloom on old wood and new wood, as well as being reblooming. Typically they're macrophylla, you get one big bloom and then they're done for the year, but these you might get sporadic reblooming. The good thing about them also blooming on old wood and new wood is that in the past with the older varieties, say like the macrophylla Nico Blue, if you prune them at the incorrect time, or if you get a late spring frost, early spring frost I should say, where it nips off the buds for that year, you may risk not getting any blooms. But if it blooms on old wood and new wood, on that new wood you still have a chance to enjoy some blooms out of that macrophylla hydrangea that year. And so the variety that they seem to have left here is the Summer Crush, which is pretty compact at only 18 to 36 inches in height and in width. And don't worry if these look like this, a little bit worse for the wear. Just prune off all of these leaves that look pretty bad and branches, and it will rebound beautifully for you. You can see there's still lots of life in here. And this one is also the Summer Crush. And some adorable annuals. These are some branching sunflowers. These are the annual sunflowers. They have tons of blooms on them. You can see how large these sunflower bloom heads are with these cheery and sunny adorable flowers. These are $9.98 for this 1 gallon Vigoro container. This would be great right now for late summer into the fall for a container arrangement, or even if you wanted to add some to the landscape. I'm actually growing the Proven Winners Suncredible sunflowers in my front walkway this year, and I'm loving them so much. But these are really pretty annual for this time of year. There are a ton of bloom buds on here, and sunflowers like sun, just as the name suggests. In fact, the blooms will look for and face the sun, which I think is really interesting. And I'm not ready to think about fall just yet, but they are starting to get some annuals for fall container refreshes. So here's a good one. It's Celosia. These are 8-inch planters for $10.98, which is not a bad price. And it's got this really pretty, vibrant red color. A lot of times you'll even find some with the dark foliage, like the Dragon's Breath that I grew last year had a gorgeous like fuchsia colored plume bloom with dark foliage. But sunflowers, and there's a few other plants, the grasses, all beautiful plants to transition into fall, even sedums. And I'm a huge fan of using perennials in containers because then you can transition those plants out into your garden. So it's definitely more of an investment instead of buying annuals that are going to die at the end of the season. You can buy things like heucheras, even some rudbeckia, and use those in your containers for the fall refresh. Some more annuals that still look really good. These light purple ones. These are our pentas. Yes, $9.98 for these, and they like full sun, 15 to 24 inches in height, 4 to 6 inches in width, water when dry, which means that they're pretty drought tolerant. And they have them in this really pretty fuchsia color, as well as this light, kind of a lilac purple pinkish color. They also have the Rudbeckia Goldstorm here at my Home Depot, and they're in the Home Depot house brand container at 2 for $15. And so here is the information on the Black-Eyed Susan Goldstrom. It's a Rudbeckia fulgida. They like full sun. They are deer resistant in my garden. Upright perennial, 24 to 30 inches in height, and need 24-inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And here is a great perennial to use in your containers as you transition into fall. This is Coral Bells, or heuchera. Look at this beautiful deep wine color on this foliage. These do really well in containers for me. I would actually say that they do better in containers for me than they do in the ground, because in the ground they tend to get smaller and smaller each year, and I'm not sure why that is, but if you do, let me know in the comments. But this one is called the Coral Bells Carnival Rose Granita Heuchera, and it is attractive foliage, attracts butterflies because they do get bloom stalks on them. You can see this one just had some bloom stalks. They look like baby's breath, little tiny blooms. And 10 to 12 inches in height, 14 to 16 inches in width, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Look how pretty it looks with this coneflower, even though they have different light requirements. And I would say water requirements too, because the coneflower likes a well-draining soil and full sun, where this likes soil that is moist but well-draining and a part shade location. So the coneflowers, which are one of my very favorite July bloomers in my garden. This one here, let's see which variety this white one is. This is the Pow Wow White, which I actually grew some from seed this year. They like full sun, again, a well-draining soil. They attract butterflies, drought tolerant, and upright. How tall does the Pow Wow White get? I want to say about 20 inches, 20 to 24 inches. They need 16 to 18 inch spacing, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the bunnies have been attracted to mine this season, so I do have to spray a liquid fence deer and rabbit repellent to keep them away. I do that about once a week. So every 7 to 10 days at max, I will go through and spray all of my plants, and I also do it after a heavy rain. But there are so many varieties of coneflowers in stock at the moment. So this one here is, let's see, Double Scoop Watermelon Deluxe by Vigoro. $10.98 for these. Drought tolerant, attracts butterflies, but look how pretty these double scoop ones are. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh, so pretty. I have a double scoop raspberry, very similar look to this, just a little bit of a shade off in color. Check out the size on the double scoop watermelon. This one gets to be 22 to 24 inches in height and needs 20 to 22 inch spacing, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And right beside it, you can't miss it from its fragrance, is lavender. Look how beautiful that is. Oh, I love lavender so much. And this is the super blue lavender. It likes full sun, also a very well draining soil that leans dry, has a mounded growth habit, and this one gets to be 10 to 12 inches in height, 12 to 14 inch spacing, hardy to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Look at that. Some more alliums. I saw these here at the Home Depot last year. I thought they were pretty interesting. You can see that these are a little bit further ahead in their bloom, and they're picking up that nice round bloom shape. They are a lighter color, so these almost look like a very light purple with a hint of pink to them. And this is called Medusa. So you can see that they're pretty tall, the bloom spikes, very wiry. They almost look like the summer drumstick alliums in terms of their growth habit. And it's called Medusa, ornamental onion. It attracts butterflies, easy to grow. These are full sun plants, mid to late summer blooming, and they get to be 20 to 24 inches in height, need 15 to 18 inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see how that foliage looks so nice and healthy. Again, these are super easy to divide. If you wanted to get maybe even 2 out of this one, you could just split it right down the middle there, and that would be really easy to do. And right on the side of it, you can see that they have this really pretty purple fountain grass. This is an ornamental grass. Now, the thing that I learned the hard way about this purple fountain grass is that it is only an annual in my zone. So again, talking about transitioning your containers from summer through fall, this would be a great update to put in the center of your container. It gets these gorgeous plumes as the summer kind of comes to an end and we run into fall. It's called the purple fountain grass rubrum. Look at those plumes in that picture. It is stunning. It likes full sun. It is labeled as an annual grass here. Sometimes they're not labeled as annual, and you might bring them home and think that they'll return, and then they won't. These are typically only hardy in zones like 10 or 11 and up. So height 24 to 36 inches, needs 18 inch spacing, but has a gorgeous deep purple color and beautiful plumes as we head into late summer, early fall. And here's another beautiful coneflower. This is the Cheyenne Spirit. And with the Cheyenne Spirit, you may get several different colors. You might get this golden yellow, a bit of a coral color. I've even seen some orange, some red, and even some cream. So it's a mix of coneflowers that you might get in the same planter. Very pretty. And the Cheyenne Spirit coneflower, you can see there, it's an echinacea hybrid. It likes full sun. And they get to be 18 to 30 inches in height, 10 to 18 inch spacing, hardy to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And like most coneflowers, it blooms midsummer through fall. Well, that brings us to the end of the late July inventory here at the Home Depot. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties and sales near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one.